Hey everybody, welcome to the bonus edition of the Art Workshop tutorial series. This is accompanying week 8 again, which has already passed. The deadline's coming up for your book submissions, but to throw in an additional tutorial at this point seemed like a fitting thing to do. Now the new deadline for the books to be submitted is December 14th. That means everything has to be into us by that date. And also we've submitted the address which you send your book to, so hopefully you have that. In case you haven't, it's P.O. Box 183, Regina, Kentucky, Regina, and the zip code on that is 41559. Alright, so today we're focusing a little bit more on watercolor, which has been something that a lot of students had questions about when coloring. Watercolor is a very easy medium to use, and since that you can apply that directly to the canvas with only water and some cakes if that's your preferred method. Now the cakes are the small, little self-contained, hard, solidified watercolor blocks that you find in kits. These are sold just about anywhere. Any store that has art supplies has these little kits, and you've seen them before. They come in different colors, and you can use those. And they're really easy to use. You apply a little bit of water, and you get that medium onto your brush, and then you apply that straight to your paper. But today we're going to be doing a tutorial where we're looking at the different types of watercolor applications. There's a few that we can look from. There's tons out there, but we're only focusing on about 3 or 4 today. Then we're going to be using a couple of those in combination with one another, I should say, in order to put together a small watercolor piece. So if you want to follow along, go ahead and grab some watercolor cakes if you have those ready, and some paper and a pencil and an eraser, and that should be everything you need. And of course a small ink pen to outline the drawing at the end when we're finished. So hope you're ready to get started for this next tutorial with watercolor and applications of the medium. Let's start off looking at the different types of watercolors you can actually use. Now this is what I meant by cakes. Cakes are just these little solidified pieces of watercolor that are put into these circle type holders or containers, and they're really easy to use. You apply water, you can mix inside of these individual cake containers, or you can mix off onto another surface. This is purchased at a really low discount store, so the quality of watercolor, and there are different qualities of watercolor, will give you different things that you can actually do with that type of watercolor. So the more expensive watercolors mix easier. The less expensive watercolors, they tend not to mix so great, but there's lots of options. Now this is a new one here. This is one I've been using. It's the same brand of this, and you can see that I've actually mixed inside of these containers a lot of times. And after you mix, the watercolor will dry. You have to be careful though. So if you mix one color to achieve a certain color using the different cakes, then once that dries, that color remains in that cake somehow. And you go next time, maybe you don't want that certain type of color, but I have a few bad habits when it comes to using watercolor cakes. I mix inside of these a whole lot, and so yeah, that's not the best thing to do. But this is one version. Now they do actually produce little kits that you can take with you. These are probably the easiest to travel with. This is a traveling watercolor kit. It comes with a brush here. This particular brand is Winsor Newton, but you can find different types of brands that make these. The little brush actually slides into its container, so you have a nice handle for your brush to use. Using watercolor while traveling, I use this in a sketchbook a lot. So if I need watercolor and I need to stick it into my bag and I'm going somewhere and I want to use watercolor in a sketchbook, this is what I take with me. It's really great to travel with, and easily to mix in these different slots up at the top here. You can mix your colors straight from the cakes here at the bottom. Now believe it or not, they also make watercolor paint, and well, it's watercolor, but it comes in these little containers. You spread this out onto a palette mixer, and then you can add water to it, and this is probably the most messy application method for watercolor. but it gives good results with that. Probably the very least messy is the watercolor pencils, believe it or not. Now there's different ways to use the watercolor pencil. A lot of people will color just like with a color pencil, then they'll take a brush with water in the tip and they will mix that on the paper itself. Other people will wet the paper first and then color. So there's different ways to do this, and there's different brands of this, of course. This is Kimberly and this is Prismacolor. This is a general brand, but it's Kimberly is the offset for that. So there's different brands you can get, different price ranges on all these, but each one of them offer, you know, their own set of pros and cons when you're using it and wanting to apply watercolor. Now, a new creation that they've actually put out by Winsor Newton, and I'm not promoting any brand in general, but are these, which are watercolor markers, and these apply the same way as the pencils. Really, you can either put water, you can color with using the marker onto the paper first and then apply water to that, mixing it, or you can spray the surface of the paper with water and then color on top of that. So we're going to be looking at a few of these today, different methods of using the various watercolor techniques here and mediums, not mediums but applications. So we're going to perform an exercise where you draw along with me at home, and we're getting ready to start that. So go ahead and grab your paper and pencil and let's get started. I'm using a 2B pencil to draw with. I'm also using this, which is just an eraser pen. So at the tip you see the eraser is there. And I'm going to use the variety of the different types of applicators for the watercolor, so you'll be seeing that towards the end. So the first thing we want to do is go ahead and draw a circle, and the circle should be fairly large in relation to your actual page, because this forms the head of this fox we're going to be coloring and drawing. So once you have the circle, I like the circle method. A lot of you know that if you've watched any of the tutorials. That's what I'm going to be using a lot. Now the thing about using pencil with watercolor is that at the end, whenever we go and we're trying to erase and get rid of these lines, we want to do that before we start watercoloring, because once you apply water on top of this graphite, it almost seals it into the paper, so there's no erasing then. So I'll show you how we're going to do that at the end. So we have a circle and an oval here. Okay, towards the end of the oval down at the bottom, you want to round this off, okay, so it comes to a point, just like that, towards the end of this oval. So we've done 3 shapes so far. We've done a circle, an oval, and then this is not really a shape, but this is just manipulating that bottom line to form the bottom part of the fox's mouth here. So now we have these 3 shapes, and we're going to go up to the top here, and we're going to sketch in the ear. And if you have to draw and erase and try again, it's okay. I trace this out just a little bit before starting and make things a little simpler for myself. So if you do have to go back and redraw something, that's perfectly fine, okay? There's no perfect first time goes at this stuff. So we have the ears sketched in a little bit. The eyes will be right here on the sides of the head, so 2 eyes, and the nose will be down here towards the bottom, about right there. Okay? Now let's look at the body. For the body, what we're going to do is first we're going to draw an oval going all the way down like this. So there's our oval shape. Okay? Once we have the oval shape, come over to the left side and bring this line out a little more. And actually bring it down towards the bottom like this, so that it curves here. Okay. On this side, what we're going to do, we're going to come down, we're going to bring it in following that oval, and we're going to stop right there. This will be the first foot of the fox. So we'll draw a little foot in there, and then of course the shape of the stomach coming down. Alright, so we have one. Now we're going to work on the other one. So draw 2 lines up at the top of where we're starting, about midway through this oval, over to the left. This will help guide where you're going to place the other foot, and bring it in towards the other paw of the fox, like this. Okay, so we have our 2 paws down here. right? And this is the other foot, which will be tucked in just a little bit here. Okay, now we got to put the fox's tail. What we're going to do is we're going to come over here and add a little bump right here on the left side to start the tail. Comes off the back of the fox, comes over and wraps around over here to a point, just like this. Okay, so now we have the general idea of what our fox will look like. What we need to do now is actually go back and grab an ink pen or a small tip marker, and we're going to trace over the lines we want to keep. Okay, so tracing over the lines you want to keep, go back over. Now I've said this before many times that when you're tracing over your pencil lines, you want to trace over the lines you want to keep. Okay, you don't want to trace over lines you don't want to keep at the end. You're going to erase the rest of the pencil lines. So I'm just tracing over the lines that I want to keep. Okay, you can add to the drawing at this point certain little features, such as the fur coming off the sides of the fox's head. Okay, you don't have to follow your lines exactly. They're just there to help guide you. Okay, that's it. They're there to help guide you. We draw the eyes in just by putting a letter C on each side where the eyes are. Okay, 2 letter C's there. And then the nose, of course, will be down at the bottom right here. Okay, so I've traced in these lines. Notice I haven't traced in here. The ear of the fox will come off of the head like this on each side. So I've left room for that here, just like that. Okay, now down at the bottom, following these lines you've created already. Okay, and you can continue to add to certain things with the drawing. This is where you would do that. Put little breaks in the line for fur, showing a little bit of texture to the drawing. Same for the tail over here, the foot at the bottom. Now this arm, we want to color that in for sure. We want to know where that ends, where it begins. Notice I'm not tracing my lines exactly as they appear. I'm kind of going off of them, but I'm not using them exactly. This is a method that helps you continually refine your drawing as you're going. It doesn't mean you have to use each line you created. Okay, so now for the tail, let me add some more breaks in the lines coming out, showing that fur just like that. See, I didn't use this line, I reshaped this a little bit. Now at the bottom we'll put some grass here, have him sitting on a little piece of land here that he's found to be comfortable, and there we go. We've traced our little fox. He's happy now, he's great and traced in, he feels complete. What we want to do now is go back over and get rid of those lines that we didn't use, our little pencil lines that aren't going to remain in the drawing. We get rid of those, okay? Because when you use the watercolor in a second, like I said, these lines will be locked into your paper. If you put water on them, there's no erasing. So get rid of the lines you don't want to use. You could do this probably, you could take your time with this, really do a great job with it, getting all the lines. For the purpose of the video, I'm going to get most of them anyway. Okay, you probably still see a few lines here and there, but that's okay. You can take more time at home to really refine it and get it looking really good. Okay, so we are getting rid of the lines. Pencil lines are almost gone, and we're almost ready to start watercoloring. And the first type of watercolor method we're going to be using is going to be the cake watercolor. So the watercolor in those little circular containers in those kits. That's what we're going to be using first. Okay. Alright, great. We've got most of our lines off there. Fox, he looks a lot better now, cleaned up some, and it looks like we're ready to start with our watercolor. Alright, here we go. So for the watercolor, the fox is going to be a series of colors: orange, white, brown, black or gray, and a little bit of yellow. Okay, now I'm pulling out my watercolor cake. Here it is. You can see it hopefully a little bit there. Let me know in the engineering room if this isn't on camera. Just kidding, I don't have an engineering room. but we're using the cake method. Now, for the cake method or application, I'm using a brush. This is a size 10. It's pretty big. I chose this so you could see it, and it also applies more watercolor to the surface at each time. I'm using a small little container that I got in a kit once from a Japanese ink set that I find really is helpful for holding water while watercoloring. So I'm getting my brush wet first. I'm looking on my watercolor kit, and I'm going to first get the cake wet using water in the brush like that. You can test out on the side to see if that's the color you want. The more water that you add to your brush, the lighter that it's going to be. Okay, so you can see now I'm starting to put the color onto the fox's head here. Now notice when I dip my brush again, the watercolor gets lighter, and I can pull color down up here around the top of the head where the watercolor is still wet and moist on the paper. You can pull that down, and what I mean by that is put your brush up there and pull it down with your brush like I'm doing. Okay, so that makes it so that your colors go from light to dark. Alright, and it's a great tip for any beginning watercolors. You know, use the color that's on your paper a lot whenever you're coloring if you want to go from light to dark. Okay, you don't want to just leave that there. It's a great opportunity to use more of it. You notice that I'm darkening in now a little bit at the top. The ears come up to a point. Now, even though the tips of the ears are going to be dark, I'm still bringing this color all the way to the top. That way, when I apply the dark color of the gray later, it can go right on top of this orange. It doesn't really matter. It's easier to go from light to dark than it is from dark to light, believe me. So if you are beginner at watercolor, remember that little tip. Go from light to dark. So we're going to go down the body now, going around the surface of the body first, because the stomach area here, the stomach area is actually white. Okay, so we're just going down the back of the fox first, getting all this color in there. See how the brush pulls color out from the sides, giving it that really nice hue of light to dark. I love that with watercolor. It's easy to do. The only thing that you have to do is just pay attention to how much water you're putting in your brush. You use a lot of water, it's going to be really, really light. Use minimal amount of water, the color is going to be darker. So the tail is all orange. So what I'm going to do is just go from top to bottom like I did with the head, making it from light to dark again. I like that effect, so we're going to keep going with it. Now notice I've applied the watercolor. Now I'm dipping only water on my brush, pulling that color down from the top of the tail down to the bottom, just like that. See? Alright, now we got to do a little bit more on the shoulder here, this area, coming down to this arm. It needs to be a little bit darker than that. Coming down underneath the chin a little bit, down this arm here. Okay, and the one thing about it is once you get down into the portions of the whatever it is you're coloring, and you don't want a lot of color, you get really nervous because you don't want to put more color down here than at the top and throwing off your entire drawing, so, or your coloring of your drawing. So just keep going with this method, adding color, go light from dark. The more water you use, the lighter the color, and we keep that process up until we get the effect that we want. Okay, still want a little more color. There we go, a little bit more color on the leg here. Okay, and I want a little bit more color on this other leg too, around the edges for sure, like this. Okay, now we have we've applied one color of orange now so far. So and we've used the cakes to do this, and cakes are, you know, they're not so messy. You can see that I'm just taking the brush into the water and then pulling it back and applying it, so you don't cause too much of a mess, or your potential of causing a huge mess with cakes are really light. Okay, now this part up here is dried more, And I'm actually going to go and put some more orange here, okay, around the top of the fox's head. I like the light color that I've got so far, but I really want this just a little darker, especially up here around the ears and around the top of the fox's head, okay? Wait till the color dries in areas and then go back over it again, the same method that you used before. If you want it to be a little darker, and you do this in layers, okay? So you have different layers of orange. You can see I've touched that at the bottom there a little bit. That's okay. Yeah, these layers help. Letting the color dry first and going back over it again, you can get that effect. It looks really nice, okay? So we want to continue with this a little bit longer, just darkening in the fox's head a little bit more, especially up here around the eyes and coming down to the nose like this. There we go. Getting that effect. See? So watercolor is fun to use. You can actually see the drawing change a little bit as the water dries. So you can see this color here, the way it looks wet and applied the first time, will actually change a lot as you move forward. Okay? As it dries, the color changes. And we want a little bit more orange on the tail. There we go. That's really good. Make it nice and bright, going down into the lower part of the tail, which is going to be a little bit lighter. So just adding water to this now after applying that color. That's all I'm doing. So there we go. We have the first round of color on our fox using the cakes. Cakes are great to use. They're not so messy, and you can take them with you too. Now we're going to try another method. This method I'm a little less familiar with, but we're going to shoot for it. I'm using a spray bottle. Now these are tiny little spray bottles that you can pick up at different department stores. They're used for different things, really. I think this is more or less used for putting different things onto a scrapbook or something. You can use this with, but it's a mini mister, and we're going to spray the drawing. I'm letting it dry a little bit now. We're going to spray the drawing. Then after we spray it, I'm actually going to be adding in a few details with brown using the Winsor color marker, watercolor marker. Okay. So like I said, I'm not real familiar with this method, so here we go. Let's try it out. So we're going to spray the drawing. There we go. One little coat, and now we're going to go back. And you can notice how that watercolor is changing here. It's actually changing a little bit. It's changing the drawing. I'm going around the edges of this with the yellow, and I'm going around the darker edges, okay, pulling that orange. So the orange is going to change a little bit. It's going to look a little different now. And once you do this, once you apply this, you can see how it's actually pulling the paper up. That's one thing you have to watch out with this, is if you get your paper too wet, the threads that make up the paper will actually start to crumble underneath the moistness. So I'm just adding a little bit of yellow in certain areas, or light brown I should say, in certain areas. Not a lot of areas, just a few, just to give a little bit of a highlight. I sprayed a little bit too much water. Okay, I probably should have gave it one squirt, and then that would have been great, but it's okay. We're both learning. We are all learning, I should say, as we go. Now you can see I've applied this on there, and you can see how this looks a little different than the nice flow earlier. I can actually fix that by grabbing my brush again and going back over top of this, okay, and mixing this again. You want to be careful about how much water you use, though. Once the paper gets really moist, then it starts to break up a little bit. So that's something I'm going to have to be careful with here. I didn't really plan for it, but that's okay. Now see how I'm pulling the color up on the ear from the top of the head here? Pulling the color up, using it more instead of applying more color on top of it each time. So there we go. Okay, now let's go ahead and try a different applicator here. We're going to actually go with the Aquatone. This is an ivory black watercolor pencil. Okay, now I have a blow dryer that when I'm doing stuff for illustrations for children's book, I'll dry the piece with a blow dryer. It saves time. Right now we're we're working. I'll fan it a little bit, hopefully that'll help some, but we're going to be applying this in the legs and the feet. So down at the bottom, you color just like you would with a colored pencil, okay? And you get it nice and layered on nice like this. Now the black actually goes up the foot about right here, but I'm stopping down here. And I'm doing that for a reason. Remember how we pulled color up from the orange or down? We're going to be doing the same thing here. Now we may have to go over it again, I'm not sure, but we'll see, okay? So the black actually goes up the feet a little bit, and then also we have blacks at the tips of the ears. So I'm going to go ahead and apply a little bit of black up here. It's actually gray, or it should be gray when we're finished. So adding that in. Now this ear is a little more moist than the bottom feet, so you can see that it actually starts to blend a little bit as I'm doing this at the top, okay? Alright, so I think we've got the areas pretty well covered. We may go back over in a second and put some dark in here just for shadow effect. You can use the same color as a shadow effect, so for the shadow you could use actually a darker orange, or you can use gray. Those are two choices that you can make. It's up to you on which one you prefer, okay? So I've applied that now. I'm taking my brush again, okay? I'm get a little bit of water in there. Now I'm going to go over top of this. Now see how it starts to blend automatically. As soon as water touches it, it starts to blend a little bit, okay? Now that's what we want. We want it to blend nice. We want it to be uniform. That means all of it look the same in how you applied the watercolor. Alright, now look, I'm just pulling this up now instead of adding more. I'm using the color that's at the bottom, and look, I'm pulling it up. See? So that's what gives you the nice blending look to the watercolor, is whenever you're using what's already on the surface and you're just moving it around on the paper a little bit with water. That's all it is, okay? So you can see how that blends nice now at the bottom. And at the ears, we'll do the same thing. Hopefully this is dried enough. So we're just blending that in at the top, coming down with it a little bit more. Do the same on this side. Be careful not to put your hand down in the middle of your drawing like I've done a few times, but it's okay. Bringing it down. Yeah, that looks nice and bright and happy, and stealing Bob Ross terms here, but we do have some nice blending going on. Hopefully you're following along with me. If you have watercolor at home, you can see how this is. Now notice how this paper is breaking up a little bit right here. And then we'll add a little bit, pulling it from this to the eyes. There we go. Alright, I think our fox is almost done, except for now we need to just go ahead and give a little green at the bottom. Again, I'm going to be using watercolor pencil. There's two shades I'm using, a lighter green and then a darker green. I'm putting the lighter green further away from the fox down here, and they're towards the bottom, and I'm putting the darker green actually up near the body. This is what I was talking about with shadow. You can do two choices. Well, you got multiple choices with shadow, but two choices that we're looking at today is using the same color, a darker hue of that color, to show shadow, versus using black or gray to show shadow. Okay, that's something that we could do a whole other video on for coloring. Alright, we've got that applied at the bottom. Okay, we'll grab our brush again and we'll start to blend this in so it starts to pull that color out. You can see how I'm going around the edges first, going all around the edges first, following the same method that I used to actually put the color on. Remember, I went from light to dark, so I'm actually going to be blending this from light to dark as well. Okay, going in towards the fox instead of just coloring the whole thing over one time, one go at it. Okay, now there could be a little bit of orange I need to add right in between the legs there and the tail, but we'll just go ahead and leave it at that for now. So watercoloring is great. I love it. You can use it on the go if you want to. It comes in all different types of ways to apply it, and always sign your work, of course. So there we go, a watercolor fox. I hope you followed along with me. Once this dries, you can go back and actually rub those pieces of paper that come up, rub that off of the drawing. Okay, but wait till it dries, or you'll get a smear like that at the top of the ear. Okay. Okay, so that sums up our week 8 bonus tutorial on watercolor. The fox was a great example, I think, for us to use in showing how watercolor spreads on the paper, how you apply that medium. Hope you've enjoyed today's tutorial. We'd like to thank KVEC, of course, for bringing this workshop and making this workshop possible to all the 17 counties participating. Would also like to thank Kelly Thompson for sure, and Jeff Hawkins and Desi Bowling in particular for this workshop. Project Prevent is a co-sponsor of this workshop, and I look forward to seeing all the submissions that are going to be coming in. 35 students will go on to be published under STARS Publishing. Then 6 of those students will apply to participate in an entrepreneurial project where they create a small business surrounding their published works. So it's an interesting and exciting time for sure here in the KVEC region. So thanks so much for participating, and until then, and next time, keep drawing.